It started as a whisper in the shadows, a rumor so implausible that even die-hard basketball insiders dismissed it as fantasy. But deep inside the war rooms of the unrivaled Women's Basketball League, a plan was already in motion, a plan to land Caitlin Clark, the most electrifying player in a generation. This wasn't just recruitment, it was espionage. Behind closed doors, league executives signed non-disclosure agreements as thick as legal novels. Players who had already signed were kept in the dark. And yet, the goal was clear: deliver Caitlin Clark to Unrivaled's grand stage, no matter what it took. The secrecy was suffocating. Those few who knew of the operation spoke in code, as if discussing state secrets rather than a sports contract. Unrivaled had already filled 26 of its 30 roster spots. But to them, the lineup wasn't complete without the Iowa legend. They believed that with Clark, they could turn the league from a bold experiment into an unstoppable cultural phenomenon. And so they moved quietly, setting the stage for an announcement that would leave fans reeling and rivals scrambling to respond. But as the weeks dragged on, the silence became deafening. Social media lit up with questions. Where was Caitlin? Why wasn't the brightest star in women's basketball on the roster of the sport's newest and most ambitious league? Publicly, Unrivaled said nothing. Privately, they tightened their grip on the secret, gambling that the suspense would only amplify the impact when the truth finally exploded into the open. Every day without her name on the roster was a day closer to a bombshell reveal. And then, without warning, the dam broke. A leaked contract appeared online, shattering months of silence and igniting a wildfire across the sports world. This wasn't just any contract. It was a golden ticket, the kind of deal that rewrites the rules of an entire industry. For Caitlin Clark, it meant guaranteed millions, national endorsements, international exposure, and a seat at the table where the future of women's sports would be decided. It was a declaration of war against the status quo. From the moment the leak hit, it was clear Unrivaled wasn't playing by anyone's rules but their own. The $75 million figure was so staggering that fans had to read it twice to believe it. This wasn't just about basketball. It was about power, influence, and a league willing to bet its future on a single player. For the WNBA, for rival athletes, for sponsors, it was the kind of seismic event that changes everything overnight. And Caitlin Clark was suddenly at the epicenter of it all. The scope of the offer was breathtaking. It wasn't just a salary. It was a complete package designed to make Caitlin Clark the face of a revolution. Unrivaled promised her the role of official league ambassador, a marketing juggernaut with her name at the forefront of every campaign. There were exclusive television rights, lucrative endorsements, and even plans to take the brand global with her as a centerpiece. This was no ordinary signing. It was an attempt to crown her as the queen of a new sports empire. And it wasn't done haphazardly. Breanna Stewart, one of Unrivaled's co-founders and a two-time WNBA MVP, orchestrated the rollout with surgical precision. Her vision was to keep Clark's involvement under wraps until the exact right moment, then unleash it like a storm. It wasn't about secrecy for its own sake. It was about controlling the narrative. Stewart knew that if Clark's deal surfaced too early, it would overshadow every other player, creating resentment before the league even tipped off. Timing would be their most powerful weapon. But the leak changed everything. The drama they'd hoped to unleash on their own terms was now in the hands of the internet, where speculation spreads faster than fact. The headlines came thick and fast. Clark's mega deal shocks the league. Unrivaled dropped $75 million bombshell. WNBA players furious over contract gap. Suddenly, Stewart and her team were no longer in control of the story. Instead, they were racing to harness the chaos and spin it into the publicity coup they'd always dreamed of before it turned into a PR nightmare. Even before the leak, Unrivaled had been making bold moves to position itself as the next big thing in women's sports. The crown jewel of their strategy? A massive media rights deal with TNT. Over 6 years, worth more than $100 million. He would broadcast 45-plus primetime games, injecting women's basketball into living rooms across America. And with Caitlin Clark at the center of it all, the league believed they could draw viewership numbers the WNBA had been chasing for decades. The implications were enormous. TNT wasn't just buying games, they were buying a narrative, a spectacle, a promise of something fresh and unmissable. And Unrivaled knew that Clark's arrival could transform those broadcasts into must-watch television. For comparison, the WNBA averaged about 657,000 viewers per game in 2024. Unrivaled's gamble was that Clark could not only match that but double it, and in doing so, justify the kind of contracts and sponsorships women's sports had long been denied. It was an audacious bet, but one they were willing to stake everything on. The magnitude of Clark's $75 million deal did more than capture headlines. It split the basketball world in two. On one side were fans and analysts praising it as a bold, overdue leap women's sports needed. On the other side were current WNBA stars, many of them MVPs and champions, who couldn't ignore the gaping chasm between their paychecks and Clark's. For players like Aya Wilson and Angel Reese, who'd spent years grinding for salaries in the $150,000 to $230,000 range, the offer was a reminder just how uneven the financial landscape still was. The resentment wasn't hidden, it was brewing in real time. Social media became a battleground. Tweets, Instagram posts, and cryptic likes painted a picture of tension simmering beneath the surface. Angel Reese, in particular, seemed to vent her frustration online, hinting that years of hard work building the sport had been overshadowed by a rookie's megadeal. And while many acknowledged Clark's undeniable star power, the deal also forced an uncomfortable question. Why had it taken a once-in-a-generation talent for women's basketball to suddenly find this kind of money? For some veterans, the praise felt like a slap in the face. In locker rooms and private group chats, the conversation wasn't just about jealousy. It was about precedent. If Unrivaled could offer Clark $75 million, what did that say about the value of every other elite player? Would it spark a wave of renegotiations? Or would it deepen the divide between the haves and have-nots? The WNBA had fought tooth and nail for incremental pay increases over decades. Now, a brand new league was breaking the sound barrier on salaries in one move. It was both inspiring and destabilizing. The irony was impossible to ignore. Many of the same stars now expressing unease had, just months before, celebrated Clark's impact on the WNBA's visibility. They had watched as she filled arenas, doubled attendance, and shattered viewership records. Yet seeing that impact quantified, $75 million quantified, was different. It wasn't abstract anymore. It was tangible proof of her commercial value, and it came with the sting of knowing that for all their accomplishments, their own marketability didn't command the same astronomical number. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark herself remained publicly silent on the tension. She didn't gloat, didn't defend herself, didn't fire back. But the silence was its own statement. In the absence of words, fans and media filled the void with their own interpretations. Was she being gracious, letting her play speak for itself? Or was she quietly aware that every dollar of that contract made her a target, both for defenders on the court and for critics off it? The uncertainty only added to the intrigue surrounding her next move. This wasn't the first time Clark had been offered life-changing money. Before Unrivaled came calling, rapper and entrepreneur Ice Cube had thrown his hat into the ring. His Big Three League, a flashy, male-dominated 3-on-3 showcase featuring retired NBA legends, had offered him more than 6 times the top player's salary in the league. That meant over $500,000 for a part-time role, a figure unheard of in women's sports outside the WNBA's biggest endorsement deals. It was a bold play, designed as much for headlines as for the actual on-court product. Cube's offer wasn't just about adding a skilled player. It was about shaking up the perception of the Big Three itself. By bringing in Clark, he could tap into her vast cross-generational appeal, pulling in not just basketball diehards, but casual fans, young girls, and social media followers who might otherwise ignore a league built on nostalgia. It was a marketing move as much as a sports decision, and Cube was unapologetic about it. He went on record saying her value transcended traditional league structures, and that he'd happily adjust his roster to accommodate her schedule. But in the end, Clark said no. She turned down the money, the media attention, and the novelty of competing alongside former NBA greats. Her loyalty to the WNBA and her belief in its potential outweighed the short-term benefits of a splashy side gig. It was a decision that baffled some and inspired others. To her, the WNBA wasn't just a stepping stone, it was home. And she wasn't ready to leave that behind, not when she believed she could help grow the league from the inside. This decision only deepened the respect many had for her. In an era when athletes are often criticized for chasing paychecks over passion, Clark's choice signaled that her goals were bigger than herself. She wanted to be part of building something lasting, not just cashing on her name. Ironically, it was that very loyalty that made Unrivaled's eventual pursuit of her all the more dramatic. They weren't just trying to sign a superstar. They were trying to lure away someone who had already proven she couldn't be bought easily. So when Unrivaled finally returned with their jaw-dropping $75 million offer, it was clear they'd done their homework. They didn't just throw money at her. They built an entire vision around her. International tours, primetime exposure, creative control over her brand within the league. It was as much a lifestyle proposition as a basketball contract. And by targeting someone who had already resisted massive offers before, they were making a statement. If Caitlin Clark could be convinced to join, anyone could. The pressure wasn't just on Clark. It was on the entire infrastructure of women's basketball. If she accepted, it would instantly validate Unrivaled as a legitimate rival to the WNBA. If she declined, it would signal that even the biggest payday in women's sports couldn't pull her away from her current league. Either way, the fallout would be massive, with ripple effects across contracts, sponsorships, and even the way future leagues approach recruitment. This was more than a signing. It was a potential paradigm shift, and the numbers told their own story. In her rookie WNBA season, Clark had boosted arena attendance by 50%, driven broadcast ratings to unprecedented highs, and turned her jersey into the hottest piece of merchandise in all of basketball, men's or women's. The so-called Clark effect wasn't just a talking point. It was measurable, bankable, and impossible to replicate. That's why Unrivaled was willing to gamble so much on her. They weren't just buying a player. They were buying a phenomenon. Sponsors knew it, too. Brands that had never invested heavily in women's basketball were suddenly lining up for partnerships, drawn by the combination of Clark's on-court dominance and off-court marketability. Every appearance, every interview, every viral clip added to her value. For Unrivaled, signing her meant plugging directly into that momentum and using it to catapult their league into public consciousness almost overnight. It wasn't just about filling seats. It was about owning the conversation. But that kind of spotlight comes with a cost. For every sponsor eager to sign on, there were critics ready to pounce on any misstep. The more money and attention funneled toward Clark, the greater the expectation and the sharper the knives as she failed to deliver. Unrivaled wasn't just betting on her skills. They were betting on her resilience, her ability to withstand not only physical challenges on the court, but also the mental and emotional toll of being the face of a movement. And yet, the gamble seemed worth it. Her rookie year had already proven she could thrive under pressure. The media frenzy, the physical play from opponents, the constant double teams, none of it had derailed her. Instead, it seemed to fuel her, pushing her to new heights. That mental toughness was exactly what Unrivaled wanted, because their league wasn't going to be a safe harbor. It was going to be a battlefield for attention, sponsorship dollars, and cultural relevance. When the TNT deal was announced alongside the leaked contract, the picture became clear. This wasn't an isolated move. It was part of a coordinated push to dominate women's basketball media. Over 6 years, with more than $100 million on the line, TNT would broadcast 45 primetime games, and Clark would be the centerpiece. It was a high-stakes partnership designed to deliver not just ratings, but legitimacy, the kind that could make Unrivaled a permanent fixture in the sports landscape. And for the WNBA, that was the most dangerous part. They had fought for decades to secure their place in the sports world, weathering financial struggles, fluctuating attendance, and constant comparisons to the NBA. Now, a brand new league was not only competing for players, but also threatening to outshine them in media coverage and star power. And at the heart of that threat was a player they'd helped turn into a household name. The WNBA's leadership knew they were staring down a crisis disguised as opportunity. Caitlin Clark wasn't just any player. They had marketed her as the future of the league. She had become the draw, the reason casual fans tuned in, the name splashed across highlight reels and jersey sales reports. And now, that same star was being dangled as a crown jewel of a rival league with deeper pockets and a willingness to disrupt every unspoken rule of the sport. It wasn't just about losing her. It was about what her departure would symbolize to fans, sponsors, and future prospects. Behind the scenes, phone calls between agents, sponsors, and team executives became frantic. The question wasn't simply whether Clark would take the deal. It was what would happen if she did. Would other top-tier players follow her lead, chasing bigger contracts and creative freedom? Would sponsors shift their investments, treating Unrivaled as a hotter, more profitable property? The WNBA's worst fear wasn't losing a single star. It was losing the gravitational pull that kept the league at the center of the women's basketball universe. Meanwhile, Unrivaled's pitch wasn't subtle. They painted a picture of a league built around player empowerment, primetime exposure, and cultural relevance. They talked about international tours, streaming dominance, and a fan-first approach that prioritized entertainment without sacrificing competition. At the center of it all, they saw Caitlin Clark as a perfect bridge between traditional sports fans and a new, younger, digital-first audience. Every detail of their offer was designed to appeal not just to her talent, but to her vision for the sport's future. Clark's camp, for their part, stayed tight-lipped. Publicly, there were no comments, no interviews, no confirmations. But privately, they weighed the offer with the gravity it deserved. It wasn't just about money, it was about legacy. Could she elevate women's basketball more by staying loyal to the WNBA, or by becoming the face of a bold new challenger? Every day the decision remained unannounced. The speculation intensified, turning the entire basketball world into an audience waiting for her next move. And all the while, the pressure kept mounting. Fans debated fiercely online, with hashtags trending and sports talk shows dedicating entire segments to the saga. Some called it a betrayal to even consider leaving the WNBA. Others insisted she had every right to seize the opportunity of a lifetime. Sponsors watched nervously, unsure whether to commit to long-term WNBA deals or hold out for a possible Unrivaled partnership. In the core of public opinion, Clark had already been put on trial. The leaked $75 million figure wasn't just an offer, it was a flex. It told the sports world that Unrivaled had both the ambition and the resources to play in the big leagues. For decades, women's basketball had been told there wasn't enough money to support superstar salaries. Now, one deal proved that narrative false. And if it was possible for one player, it raised the uncomfortable question, why not more? The conversation was no longer just about Clark. It was about the systemic undervaluing of women athletes. I.O. Wilson's reported $230,000 salary became the comparison point in every article and TV segment. The math was brutal. Clark's deal was over 300 times larger than some veteran contracts. The disparity didn't just sting, it burned. It made it impossible for the WNBA to hide behind budget constraints without looking outdated. And while some players supported Clark's right to earn as much as she could, others couldn't shake the frustration that it took a rookie to unlock that kind of investment in the sport. That's why Clark's track record mattered so much. In just one season, she had shattered attendance records, drawn in over 1 million viewers per game, and sparked the largest jersey sales spike in WNBA history. The Clark effect wasn't hype, it was data. Arena attendance up 50%. Merchandise flying off shelves. Streaming numbers through the roof. Every metric pointed to the same conclusion. She wasn't just participating in the league's growth, she was driving it. And Unrivaled knew exactly how to monetize that momentum. Even her critics couldn't ignore the business case. With Clark on the roster, Unrivaled could guarantee sponsors primetime exposure and a massive built-in fan base. They could pitch TV networks not just games, but cultural events. Every matchup she played would be a storyline. Every highlight reel a marketing campaign. She was a walking headline. And in the attention economy, that was worth more than any stat sheet. The TNT broadcast deal sealed the vision. 45 primetime games over 6 years, a $100 million-plus commitment. And Clark at the center of it all. Unrivaled wasn't asking fans to imagine her in the spotlight. They were promising to put her there. And with TNT's reach, it meant she wouldn't just be a star in women's basketball. She'd be a household name across the sports world. For Unrivaled, it was the ultimate power play. For the WNBA, it was a direct challenge to their throne. Sponsors began to hedge their bets. Some doubled down on their WNBA commitments, hoping loyalty would pay off. Others quietly reached out to Unrivaled's marketing team, eager to lock in ad space during those TNT broadcasts. The shift was subtle but significant. For the first time in decades, the WNBA wasn't the only major stage for women's basketball. And it was all happening because of one player's potential decision. That's what made the tension so palpable. This wasn't a slow, gradual evolution. It was a potential overnight power shift. One signature could alter the course of the sport for a generation. For some, it was exhilarating. For others, it was terrifying. And as the debate raged on, Caitlin Clark remained the one person who could end it all with a single statement, but chose not to. In the absence of answers, the legend grew. Every public appearance, every cryptic post on social media became fuel for speculation. Reporters dissected her body language. Fans scanned for clues in her interviews. Even unrelated WNBA press conferences were hijacked by questions about her future. The silence wasn't just strategic. It was suspense, stretched to its breaking point. And then there was the ice cube factor, lingering in the background like a ghost of what could have been. His Big Three offer had already shown the world that Clark's appeal wasn't confined to women's basketball. The fact that she turned him down once only heightened the stakes now. If she said yes to Unrivaled after rejecting him, it would speak volumes about the kind of league she wanted to align with and the kind she didn't. Cube, for his part, didn't hide his admiration. He went on record again, praising her value and hinting that the Big Three door would always be open. But even he seemed to acknowledge that Unrivaled's offer was a different beast entirely. It wasn't a cameo, it was a coronation, and if she accepted, it would cement her as the centerpiece of a league built to disrupt. For Clark, the decision was about more than just the next few years. It was about shaping the trajectory of her career and the sport itself. Staying in the WNBA meant continuing to build on the foundation she'd already laid, fighting for incremental change from within. Joining Unrivaled meant betting on a revolution, with all the risk and reward that came with it. Either path could make her a legend. Either path could make her a target. And that's where the story sits now, in a rare, electric pause before the outcome. Every day without an announcement is another day of mounting speculation, another day of pressure building in the background. No matter what happens next, the ripple effects will be felt across women's basketball for years. One contract, one decision, one player holding the power to change everything. When the decision comes, it won't just be a sports headline. It will be a cultural moment. And whether Caitlin Clark stays or goes, one thing is already certain. The game will never be the same again.